Hey everyone, just a quick introduction to the video today. Recently I was asked by IDSA to participate in a workshop covering a few AI workflows. I needed to go through and test the time of the section that I was giving, and figured it would be helpful just to go ahead and record it and post it on YouTube. So if you're a young designer and you're looking to learn Midjourney or kind of get your head around AI, this video is for you. It's basically just a light introduction, kind of covering some of the tools, the workflows, the use cases, and just kind of the way I try to think about AI within the context of industrial design process. So enjoy. All right, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about AI as it pertains to industrial design in particular. So on the day of the workshop, or for anyone who is attending the workshop, we're covering basically three different pillars. The section that I'm going to focus on in this video, but also in the workshop, is going to be this AI section here at the beginning. So just like one kind of caveat that we've found with AI in terms of testing workflows and kind of validating its place, it tends to be the most relevant at the beginning of the process. And then as you kind of go through product design and development, its usefulness tends to kind of go down over time. And then of course, once you start like implementing and developing products, you're really not going to be using it much at all for a couple of reasons, but mainly it just isn't effective. So one thing I'm going to talk about before I get started here, I've got the slide on screen, is just thinking about the legality of these tools and how to put yourself in that frame of mind. One thing I'll say up front is your ethics are your own. I'm not here to tell anybody if these tools are right or wrong. I think that that's kind of a personal decision that you are just going to need to make on your own. But the legal side is a little bit of a different story. I think it's good to know when you're going into this, just keep in mind, these tools are sort of in just a constant gray area. So just kind of being aware of that. I think like erring on the side of caution in general is a good thing. Another point I have on here is to know the terms of service. The two tools I'm going to be showing today, ChatGPT and Midjourney, both have pretty tight legal documentation in terms of services when it comes to commercial licenses. That's one of the reasons I gravitate towards these two tools. There's a lot of options out there. I think in general, it's good to just kind of pick a tool. I like Midjourney and ChatGPT because they're kind of on the forefront. They have good updates, they good development. I think they tend to pretty much deliver like best in class results, and legally, they're kind of not the easiest, but we at least know what we're dealing with. But again, like within those terms of services, just a few things to know, like know where the copyright is and where it isn't, and understand how confidential information or how your input is being used once you throw it in. So like as an example, Midjourney, they actually, once you put an image on input, they own the copyright to that, and they can sub-license input images. That's in their legal documentation. So just be careful about what you're putting in there in general. And just be careful what you're sharing. I think the big thing for us to kind of keep in mind is for industrial design, we own IP once a product becomes reality. So in terms of like brainstorming, fighting the white page, coming up with ideas, putting just ideas down on paper, I personally don't have a great deal of concern around the legality of AI. Marketing's a little bit of a different story. If you're in a situation where you're trying to use AI to generate like customer facing images that the company you work for, or your consultancy, or whatever the situation is that you own, that I strongly encourage people to kind of shy away from in general. But industrial design, the process of creating physical product, generally speaking, we're okay. All right, so one thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump into ChatGPT here. Now, I think anyone who works in design will probably tell you the hardest thing in the world is just designing a project with completely open constraints. Most of the time, it just makes it where it's very easy to like get lost in the process. And to be honest, in the end, if you don't have any constraints, chances are the product you're going to end up with isn't going to have a lot of relevance or really be solving any problems, which is the goal of what we want to do with design. And that's kind of why we're working in design. So what we want to do is try to find some constraints here. Now, generally, if you're doing an exploration project and you're trying to feed up, it's good to kind of give yourself some direction. So one thing we might do for like a headlamp in particular is we might just say, we might just start looking for problems, right? So what are some common complaints with headlamps as it pertains to the industrial design of the product, right? Because today we want to focus on industrial design. We want to focus on the physical thing itself. I'm not too worried about software or engineering performance. I purely want to kind of be thinking about form and the like external housing of this thing. So let's see what this comes back with. Okay, so right away we got a few different things here. We got uncomfortable head straps. So like a head strap improvement, that could be a good direction. Poor fit, that is a good problem, but it's something that could be kind of difficult for us to work with for today. Confusing or inaccessible controls. So this is pretty interesting. Buttons that are too small, buttons that are hard to find, non-intuitive button sequences, hard to tell what mode you're in. So these are all very good problems that to me feel very visual and something that we can go ahead and start to solve here. So one thing I'm going to do as I'm kind of like going through ChatGPT and reading through this information, one complaint that I hear a lot is when people get in these chatbots, it can get very overwhelming, and the temptation can be pretty strong to just copy and paste this stuff. It's so long, it's so in depth. What we're looking for here are just kind of like top level highlights, things that we can kind of like tee up once we go to Midjourney. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to basically just have a Miro board here, and I'm going to start kind of organizing our thoughts. So one thing we might say is, okay, head strap, discomfort could be a good point for something we might want to think about. This problem with the controls, so control, size, and accessibility, that could be a good area for us to focus on. What else do we have? Tactile feedback, auditory feedback, control. Lighting performance is interesting, so maybe the light isn't bright enough, so maybe we want to have headlamp where it's got like a really big, bright and bold light source, so we can pull that out. Bright light source. Add that. Battery issues, that's a little bit of that's going to be engineering. Concerns, environmental concerns, durability and materials, that could be a good one. So I'm seeing here like the plastic components are a common complaint, moving parts. So we could say durable materials, maybe that's a thing that we can focus on when we generate our images. So durable materials. And too many features, too many modes. So we have a few things. We're kind of getting started here, but I kind of want this project to have a little bit more of a unique flavor to it. So let's ask ChatGPT another question here. So one thing I'm curious about is if there's a persona or a target customer that we can focus on here. So let's try this. Let's try, what are some underrepresented customers in the headlamp market? Let's see who this comes back with. So one thing I just feel like kind of intuitively off the bat is with headlamps, they tend to be really outdoorsy. They tend to be focused on people who are in shape and going on long hikes, but I think that archetype could have usefulness beyond that target customer. So another thing here is I think you can take this as far as you want, right? We could keep brainstorming things, we can keep going forward, but I can also start to now like iterate and develop things more in depth here. So maybe I say, create a persona card for designing a headlamp for children, right? So I can kind of start to turn these into like design directions. I can kind of take it a little bit further. If you know, I haven't designed a lot of products for kids, I can kind of start to understand that market a little bit better. what makes them tick, their frustrations, like here. So headlamps are uncomfortable, headlamps slip off. Again, the buttons, the bright, boring design, right? Too serious design, that's something we can focus on. Right, so I have enough here where I feel like I'm able to get started. I have a few ideas. I can start generating some imagery. This is kind of nice. Mood board keywords, right? That feels very usable. Like one thing we can do if I don't want to make a bunch of post-it notes is I can just do a quick screenshot and bring that into the Miro board. So get my tabs confused here. Right, so I can bring this in my Miro board. I can add that, and now I've got a few visual words that I can play with later once I start generating images. All right, so I have a pretty solid direction here. I feel like I can start to jump over to Midjourney and generate some concepts, some ideas. So let's go over to Midjourney. Now, before I start, there's a couple ways that I set this up going into it. So we're gonna go down to filter here, like in this top right. So what I like to do is keep this pretty simple, right? All these kind of aesthetic parameters I tend to turn down pretty low. Variety is really the only one I'll kind of use, and even if I use it, I'll only put it, 10, 20, 30, and kind of these like lower number ranges. Make sure I keep stealth on, just for the sake of, like I said, I don't want my images to be visible to other people. I don't want people to necessarily like see my laundry or my process of what I'm doing. And then this is the big one, is I keep the mode set to raw. Industrial design, our job at the end of the day is to create real world products, right? It's not, we're not trying to win like a style contest. Even with like sketching, right? Like our goal at the end of the day is to just draw something that looks real, that looks like it could be made. We want to communicate with our clients. We want to communicate with our customers. So the stronger and more clear that is, the better. So I keep that set to raw. And then the last one is the image size and kind of this like aspect ratio slider. Now, typically what I'll do is I'll try to keep things in like a little bit of a landscape format. Really all it is at the end of the day is if I need to like make a slide and I want the image I've generated to take up the whole slide, I just want to make sure that that's going to fit. But the biggest thing with the aspect ratios that I found is that it'll really affect the design of the product in the image that's coming back to you. So if I use a like really wide aspect ratio, it's going to naturally try to create, in this case, a headlamp that kind of like fits that the boundary of that image, right? So we kind of want to keep things a little bit more square generally, to start with. If you're working on something like a car or a boat or something that is like has kind of like a longer, more like horizontal proportion, then by all means feel free to like drag that slider out. But I've just found in general, like I tend to have a little bit more control the more closer to square the image is. So for the sake of getting started here, we'll just do maybe 4x3 here, to kind of get going. Now we want to start with a couple directions here, right? So let's go back to our Miro board here. And let's try to pick out a couple things. So I think the easiest way to do this is going to be to start with maybe one of these demographics. So I think children sounds interesting. Let's go ahead and like set that down here for our direction. I think the controls and having kid-friendly controls, that could be interesting. So we'll bring that down as well. And then maybe we can think about light source a little bit, right? So these are kind of the three that I'm going to hone in on and think about for this initial concept. The thing that I find is the most helpful first to do is say what I am generating first. So we're going to say the headlamp, right? We want to make a headlamp, and I want that thing to have a certain design language. Let's say it's a modern headlamp. We'll kind of say, hey, I'm telling it, hey, this image I'm generating, I want it to be a headlamp that looks like it could hit the market today. Now another thing I might say is we'll get our customer in there, right? Our persona. So designed for kids. I might say bright colored plastic, right? If this is a kid's product, like as much as we found that there's problems with the materials, maybe, we we can figure out how to solve that. So like, maybe it's brightly colored plastic with rubber overmolds, right? So we kind of fit, we fit that. Correct this here. And then the last thing I want to do again is like kind of dictate a little bit about the image. So I might say product photography on a white background. Okay, so one mistake I see a lot of people make in general is they'll put in a prompt, they'll generate an image, and they'll kind of wait and they'll see what comes back, right? The problem is that the more waiting I'm doing on this thing, the more time I'm losing. I'm wasting time. And if we're trying to work professionally, right, we're trying to make money, hit deadlines, and we want to explore as much as possible, sitting here and waiting for each generation is just not something that's going to be viable in our workflow. So again, this is another reason I like Midjourney is I can rerun this, right? So once I run this, I see, hey, generally speaking, this is giving me imagery that is kind of working for getting design. The only thing I might change here is I might say modern headlamp with a geometric modern lamp. Okay, let's try this. I think what we're going to do is do designed with simple shapes and then do a comma here and do 4 kids. And let's see if that gets us in a little bit better of a direction that doesn't drive Aaron and Derek totally nuts. There we go. So it's a little bit more subdued now, right? This is a little bit more straightforward. So once I see like I have a direction here, I can just run this as much as I want, right? So a lot of times I might run like 8, 9, 10 different generations all running at the same time. I forget what the limit is on Midjourney. I think it's 16 though. I think you can have 16 or 20 generations running simultaneously. So when this basically costs me nothing, if I'm on a plan that includes a certain number of hours, and if I find that over time, hey, I'm not hitting those hours, there's no reason not to just run a lot of these generations. And kind of really go that way. So we've got quite a few different images here. These are some of these are pretty interesting. Let's see what stands out. So actually that first generation I ran here had some that I liked. So one way I'll do this is I can either look at it broadly like this and just see if anything stands out, but I find that usually I just kind of click these and we'll flick through. So this is cool. I like these like simple controls here. I like this shape. So one thing I'll do when I start getting like a lot of image generations going is I'll just go ahead and start pulling these over and kind of noting what I like about them. I think there's a kind of a trick with Midjourney where when you're generating a ton of images, again, it's going to be like easy to get lost in the sauce. And if you start like either downloading too many or you're copying and pasting too many into an online whiteboard or whatever you're doing, sometimes it's easy to like lose the idea you have that image sparks if you're going back and looking at it again later. So one thing I like to do is I like to just kind of like denote a couple things here that I like. So large knob for what are we calling this, head strap. So maybe I'll denote that. I also like the large light source. I like the simple shape, but this knob here in particular is one thing that stands out. So let's go ahead and upscale that. So one thing I'll do, like another way I'll kind of manage this is I'll just run a bunch of generations. And then once I feel like, okay, I've got, I don't know, 30 generations here or something like that, I'll go ahead and start picking out ones I like and upscaling them just so that they kind of sit at the top of this feed here. So like this one I like. Now, there's a couple things we can do with this image in general. We could give feedback to Midjourney, which that doesn't matter. We can start to vary this, which is interesting. It'll basically just take that image and do different versions of it. Another thing I can do that I like is I like upscaling things. So again, they just go to the top of that feed and I can reference them later. I can also use this image. So if this is like generally kind of close to what I want to be doing, maybe I'll pull this image up and start to reference it. And so what I can do now, maybe I like this, but I don't like the colors. So I could say white and orange, and do generations that way. I can also animate it, which we'll do kind of maybe a little bit closer at the end. So this is kind of the process of what we want to start doing. So I'm just going to start flicking through these here. And I'll look to see what stands out. This is kind of interesting, like a knob on the top. Again, big light source. This one's maybe a little bit like a pacifier. This could be interesting, right? Big control knob on the top, big light source, simple shape. Head strap isn't quite there, but still maybe this is interesting. So we'll upscale that one. Maybe we'll vary it as well. It's interesting to see it interpreting this almost as a binoculars. I'm not sure if I like that or dislike that. I do like this idea of this. It kind of gives me this idea of like, hey, maybe this headlamp is kind of sparks imagination in a way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to screenshot this and bring it over. And I kind of like this like explorer direction. So maybe I'll just note that down real quick. Let's see what else we got here. These are kind of cool. This two-tone thing is interesting. I like this kind of sandwich construction as well. That might work well for manufacturing if it's kind of this like three-piece thing, or even two-piece. And maybe this green is like a rubber overmold. So there's something going on here that I kind of like as well. This two-piece. So maybe I'll pull that in. I'll note something like that. So green rubber over mold on yellow plastic. So maybe that's kind of an interesting idea for construction that we could work with. What else we got here? This one's kind of cool. Now, I think another thing I want to talk about just very quickly is like mentality when looking at this in general, right? Again, I know that I'm going to go into this and do my design process. I'm going to create a more final design intent. All I'm looking for here is ideas, right? So one thing I see in terms of where people like bounce off of AI and I think lose the value of these tools, they'll look at images like this and they'll just kind of be like, well, this isn't realistic and this shape is impossible and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, we can be critical of it. I get it, but again, like that's not what I'm using this for. I'm not using this to create a single image of a final design that I'm going to go send to somebody in CAD. Like I'm using it to kind of like get ideas and just find like a good starting point. So these are pretty cool. Yeah, there's some interesting things here. Again, I'm just kind of scanning, looking for anything that stands out. Okay, so we're getting near the top here. I can already see with the white and orange. So if I look here now, I can see a little bit of how this works, right? So you can see the variation, right? Where I kept that original image. Here's the original. I upscaled it, so they're right next to each other here. And you can kind of see it's keeping the general kind of shape, the structure. It's the single lens, this kind of like blue and green plastic, but now it's just giving me different design iterations, which is kind of nice. One thing I like that could be cool is if this is almost like a big, I kind of like this Boolean shape here of like this lens sitting almost like on top of the design. So I'll pull that in as well. And maybe I'll put that here with this one. And again, I'll just make a note. Say Boolean lens shape. Okay. And then you can see here, right? So there's like the three things I was able to do once I had my direction. I could, I upscaled it. I was able to iterate on it, or I was able to use that as an image. This was maybe a little bit less effective, which is interesting. So we could always problem solve that, figure that out as we go forward. These are pretty interesting. These are variations on something. I don't remember what we varied here, but these are really cool. Let's see, what else do we have here? So I think I'm pretty much on time, which is good. I really like this one. There's something kind of like nautical about it. Interesting. It feels very playful. These are maybe a little bit more funky, but I kind of like this like round silhouette. So maybe I'll pull that in as well. Say circular silhouette. Now, another thing I can do in Midjourney that I think is extremely useful is Midjourney has an edit function. So one thing I can do is, like, let's say I like this image, and I like that it has this control button on the top, but I might want to see like other options of just that control button. So what I can do is I can actually come and edit. I don't know why I'm having to do terms of service again. I can put that image's URL in, and then what I can do is just paint out that control button, and I can actually now start to iterate on this. So I might let's grab that same prompt, right? Use that as a starting point to make edits. So it's a modern LED lamp designed with simple shapes for kids, brightly colored plastic. But now what I'm going to do is kind of tell it, instead of the headlamp, which is, again, right, that first part of the prompt, I'm telling it what it's generating. I want to say control knob, right? Now again, right, I don't want to just sit here, wait on these four, have it whiff. We can do a bunch of generations here. So we'll let these process for a minute. And then what we can do is now start to see different iterations, different shapes of controls, right? So this is kind of cool. Like maybe it's just a clicker, right? Maybe this headlamp doesn't even need a brightness function for kids. It just needs to be on off. Like that could be kind of cool. More twist knobs. Some of these are not good, right? A lot of these are not good. A lot of this is throwaway, but whatever. It doesn't cost me anything, and all I'm really looking for is, at the end of the day, I just need one good idea, right, that I can turn into a product. This is kind of cool if this had like grips on it. So maybe I grab this one, right? I'll screenshot this, bring it over to Miro. What I can do now in Miro is like start to connect different directions, right? So maybe I have this. Say, okay, I like the circular silhouette, but now I'm starting to do different controls, so I can start to like point these things together. And maybe I make a note like, hey, I like this, but it kind of needs like grips here. So just draw little grips in. And again, these are notes, right, for when I go to the next phase. So what did we say? We like that one, and there was that clicker, right? So there's the clicker. Maybe I grab that one as well. And again, another thing I can do, right, is I can just be like upscaling these to my gallery. Again, though, what I kind of try to do in general with these subscriptions is avoid generating too much. Again, like I know we're limited on number of hours, we're limited on number of generations, right? So we want to be kind of smart. Like, so if I can just screenshot this and pull it in Miro, and I'm not using all my hours to do these upscales and these upreses, I'm generally speaking, gonna like prefer to do that. So again, a note here, maybe we do textured roller. And this one, we could say clicky on. All right, so now for Derek, I think we're pretty much ready to hand off. We have 2 or 3 directions here, right? If he wants, he can do this circular direction, which I think is cool. This construction, the binoculars, or if he just wants to do something that's a little bit simple and straightforward. If I had time, I would go back. I'd probably like iterate on this knob here, or I could iterate the switch. I could iterate the lens, right? I can start now like picking these things apart. So again, I can do another edit. Maybe I like this clicky knob, but I want a different lens. Headlamp lens. Let's see what that does. All right, pretty good. I'm a little all over the place. Maybe I'll do this again. Oh, so this is cool. So these are pretty interesting. Like these lenses are kind of neat. I like this, right? There's that kind of nested lens idea that I liked before. So maybe I pull that in with this concept. This is kind of interesting. Like if they could almost like direct the light, that could be kind of cool. And I think that could be fun for kids too, right? Like teaching them about light behavior and how like light gets cut off. So maybe I'll pull that in. And now what I can do, right, is if I'm starting to get different directions here and different iterations, is I can kind of start to pull in categories, right? So here's this, so here, actually, let's do it like this, all right? That tree thing I talked about in the beginning, right? So again, this is how we want to think about this, right? This tree going forward, and then we're kind of going forward in our concepts as well, right? So now I'm starting to get to like a final design. And again, I can repeat this process as much as I want, right? So I could just do this one over and over. I could go back, I could do the binoculars, I could do this one and iterate on this. You know, you can kind of go as much as you want, but for the sake of this time, ending on time here, I think I'll stop it there.